Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Please make yourself comfortable. Find a seat if you need. There's definitely a couple up front over here. So yeah, please get settled. And if we need a couple extra chairs, once I'm done with this announcement, I can pull some extra chairs. But to get us started, I wanted to welcome you all to the Magnum Foundation. My name is Jasmine Chang. I'm the space manager here, and we are so excited to have 10 by 10 photo books, to have Stacy and Carly here with us, as well as all of you. I am just going to share a few words about Magnum Foundation. So, Magnum Foundation is an organization that supports expanding creativity and diversity in documentary storytelling. And we do that through grants, creative collaborations, and events such as this. Um, I want to invite you all, if you have a moment, to have a look at our exhibition that's up right now. This is on our Counter Histories initiative, and it's 4 artists out of a cohort of 20 some that are looking into the archives and thinking about how to expand, fill in the gaps, reimagine, and create future archives. So this particular exhibition is all about looking at state archives and like narratives of state power. So yeah, welcome you all to have a look. And and we do have more chairs. Um, Two quick notes for today's events. We have a restroom in the back. It is gender neutral and it's just right behind the kitchen. And also, today's event is hybrid. So we also have guests joining online. Hello to those of you joining online. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A and invite those of you online to input your questions on the Q&A function so they can be answered here as well. So please come find me if you have any questions about our space. And without further ado, I will pass this along to Russet to get us started.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, and welcome everyone. This is 10 by 10's 71st Salon. So we've been doing this for a while. And we couldn't do this without partners like Magnum Foundation or the New York Public Library or Penumbra or DeFirma, all these places that have physical brick and mortar who share their spaces with us to make the salons possible. So welcome to our audience online as well. I don't think you can see me. I'll stand a little bit more forward. So my name is Russet Letterman, and I run 10 by 10 with Olga Yitzkavich. And we have a wonderful team that includes Dolly Mirren and David Solo and Jeff Gutterman and Shay Bosch, who is our work scholar this semester. And Dolly Mirren has been helping with our salons. And these salons are supported in part by a very generous grant from Richard Grossbard. So it helps us kind of make these possible. We're very happy to be holding a salon here. And I just want to kind of give a shout out to the Magnum team, to Jasmine, who just spoke before me, to Kristen Lubin, the executive director, and to Mecca, who's now on the door, who was helping with the wine. For those of you who don't know 10 by 10, does anyone not know 10 by 10? Okay, I'm going to avoid giving you the spiel then of what we do, because if you all know who we are, that's fine. But you can support us if you want. You can go online and give a donation to help us continue doing this. And that would always be greatly appreciated. So tonight we have two presenters. We have Stacy Kranitz and Carly Ries. Stacy is going to present first, and she will share two projects with us: As It Was Given to Me and A Year After a Denied Abortion. Carly will present immediately after Stacy and will discuss her recent book, Centerfold. After they both present, we will have time for Q&A, as Jasmine mentioned, and we welcome questions from the audience as well as from our Zoom participants online. So now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Stacy Kranitz, who works within the documentary tradition, making photographs that acknowledge limits of photographic representation. Her images do not tell the truth, but are honest about their inherent shortcomings, and thus reclaim these failures: exoticism, ambiguity, fetishization, you gave me a hard word there, Stacy, as sympathetic equivalents in order to more forcefully convey the complexity and instability of our lives, places, and moments they depict. For the past 14 years, Stacy has been making photographs in the Appalachian region of the United States in order to explore how photography can solidify and demystify stereotypes and interpret memory and history in a region where the medium has failed to provide an equitable depiction of its people. So she's going to be discussing two projects. I'm going to leave it to Stacy, and then when she's done, I will introduce Carly, and we'll move immediately from one to the next. So don't leave your seats, and then the questions will open up at the very end. So thank you very much and enjoy the evening.
Great. Thank you so much, Russet, and thank you so much, Jasmine, for helping us with tech, even though we were quite a mess. It's so nice of you all to come. I am going to shift between two projects, as Russet mentioned. The first one is a book that I made that came out in 2022, and it's called As It Was Given to Me. And help me, Carly. And then the full screen would be. So this is the book right here. My publisher just texted me that we are sold out. So if you are interested in getting a copy, I would go online and order one. They're probably still at a few bookshops. And I wanted to start by talking about what Appalachia is. So it is 420 counties. This is the shape. It's 420 counties. It's a government constructed set a boundary that was made in the 1960s to help funnel money into a poor rural region of the United States that had been responsible for all of our energy sources through the production of coal, but these coal operators left the area very poor and depleted. In 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson announced the war on poverty, and this was a really significant moment for Appalachia. It became the poster child for poverty. It was kind of it was an intention on Lyndon B. Johnson's part to show a face so that the American public could rally around the initiative and support Lyndon B. Johnson in eradicating poverty. It's such a strange concept because I don't think we would ever even fathom doing something like that now. But what happened when Lyndon did this is him visiting an out-of-work coal miner in Kentucky. But what happened is that he asked the media to come down to the region and show the poverty. But what happened was the media descended in a very intense way, and they created some pretty severe stereotypes. And as you can see by these captions, and it's funny, the media is still doing things like this today. When you have a tornado or you have a hurricane, they descend and they obsess, and there's this like very intense appetite, and then they just leave. So that is what happened in the region. And much of my work is a response to this period of depiction of the region. I'm going very quickly, so I apologize. I became really interested in these images and some of the repetitive tropes. And this, back to my work. So one of the things that I was really interested in doing is that I didn't want to right a wrong by making work that was selectively positive, because it's not honest. And so I didn't want to just continue this tradition of fetishizing the other, fetishizing poverty. So I tried to find this place in the middle, which I call a place at the side of the road, which is an idea that I got from this really wonderful book by Kathleen Stewart, who is an anthropologist. But basically, it's this place in the middle, between right and wrong, between good and bad. And to me, that's where the truth lies. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the elements in the book. They all come together to make this narrative. So when I was trying to organize the work at the very beginning, I became really enamored with these depictions of Daniel Boone. And I found that they were useful to sort of clarify and create chapters. So this is Arrival. That's actually Boone pretending to discover Kentucky. And then there's Boone's daughter being taken by the natives. And that's the second chapter, which is exploration. And, exploration is when things, that they arrive and then things start to get murky and kind of become undone. And then this is Salvation, the third chapter. And this is Daniel Boone at rest. I say when I say like Daniel Boone came in and discovered Kentucky in that kind of famous image, what he really did was discover capitalism in Kentucky. So he brought capitalism to the region. And at the end of his life, he was like retired, and he brought in all this real estate development and the coal industry, the railroad industry. And but he's retired very poor because he was very bad at real estate investment, which I think is remarkable. There's also a series of self-portraits. Each chapter ends with a self-portrait. I'm very interested in the so when I began making this work, I was I guess you could call me a photojournalist. I was an assignment photographer for magazines and newspapers. I still am today. And I became really obsessed with this idea of, or the fantasy of objectivity, this sort of false idea of objectivity that my clients, that the newspapers and magazines kept trying to assert into the work, because it just didn't make any sense to me. And so I knew that I wanted to make a body of work that kind of addressed that. And that's how I ended up working in Appalachia. And so the self-portraits were a way to look at this idea of when you go to a place that is other, you go to it with a set of ideas about books, images, movies, right? All these different kinds of resources that you've collected to try to understand this place, or that just have like come to you. And that collides with the reality of the circumstances that you're experiencing as you engage with people in that place. And it's that collision that really interests me. And so the self-portraits kind of, well, they're actually of this woman named Christy. Does anyone know Christy? Christy is a Christian romance novel. And Christy is a missionary, and she goes into the mountains to teach the poor children how to read and write. And I found that to be a really interesting corollary to the photojournalist, who also asserts an idea of a right and a wrong onto a group of people through like moralism and capitalism. And so I sort of began to enact Christie. So I'm, kind of bringing in this element of fantasy, and also really kind of pointing to my role in the work. And really by that, I mean the arrogance of my role in the work as the person who gets to dictate how the narrative goes. Oh, there's Christie. Yeah. So it was originally a book, but when I was a child, it was a miniseries on TV. And so that's how I came to know Christie. It's a romance novel. She's like, she's torn between the preacher and the doctor, It's actually really good. It holds up well, even many years later. This would be what I call the two extractors. So you've got the photographer and the coal. This is just, you know. I also have a lot of drawings in the book. These are based on topographic drawings, and they are the end pages as well as the cover. And the drawing, I was really obsessed with the shape of Appalachia because it's not something that we're familiar with, which I think is kind of interesting. They're not on a flag or anything like that. And so I really wanted to represent it. And I found this really interesting sociological book that kind of demarcates these different parts of Appalachia using different types of data. This is called music source areas. So it's like the different types of music that are in Appalachia. So I just took all the data away and just kind of showed these shapes. And I just really interested in the constant like desire that we have to draw boundaries, to draw lines. I believe this is the freeway system or the railway system. It's one of the two. This is the coal resources, the coal industry. And then the other part of the book that is kind of essential to it is a series of text that, okay. Oh, it's upside down too. I got you. Okay. So, and that flows throughout the book. It's text that I pulled from a weekly newspaper in Letcher County, Kentucky. And they have this column called Speak Your Piece. And you can write, email, or call with whatever you're thinking. And I've tried this out, and they have written everything that I emailed in. So it's quite remarkable. But for me, it was a way of marking time. I started pulling from the Speak Your Piece archive the first day I made this work up to the right before I published the book. And what I found really helpful is that there were certain like things that were happening in the region that I couldn't properly explain through the images. The decline of the coal industry, the rise of Trump, the opioid epidemic and the way that it affected the region. And so this became a really incredible way to sort of share some of those issues and what people were thinking about them. And there's a lot of really painful universal themes, a lot of longing for a lost love. It's a really, really, I read through the whole 12 years, kind of from the beginning to end, and it read like a great novel with reoccurring characters. It's just a remarkable archive. And then the final element that I wanted to share with you that's an important part of the book is that many of these pictures are taken as I just move through the community, but there are three people that I'm very close to. Well, there's more in the work, but these are the three most important people to me. And I return to photograph them. I stay with them when I'm traveling. And they have formed a really important part of the narrative because that's who I talk to about how I sort of put together the book. And they gave me a lot of feedback that I found incredibly important and useful. So this is Colby, and this is Derek. Colby lives in West Virginia, a town called Mason, West Virginia. Derek lives in Cobb County, Tennessee, and Pat lives in West Columbia, West Virginia. And I dedicated the book to them. Okay, roll on. Okay, okay. Yeah, oh, okay, so I'm gonna switch projects. So I will talk about it while I slowly figure this out. When a little over a year ago, do I? I got a call from one of my editors. As I said, I work as an editorial photographer. It's how I make my living, which is a whole nother discussion. So this is a project that we launched online by the people at ProPublica. Does everyone know what ProPublica is? the nonprofit newsroom. Investigative reporting is what they focus on. This was their first visuals first commission. So it was a really exciting thing to be able to do. Originally, it was just an assignment. And I was following this woman, Mayron, and her husband, Chris, which you can see up there, as Mayron dealt with a pregnancy that was threatening her life. And she was unable to get an abortion, which was what the doctors recommended, because she did not have the money to leave the state, and the Dobbs ruling had just gone into effect. And really, the hospital and the doctors really didn't know how to handle the situation because it was so new to them. I know we all remember how quickly that happened. And so it was really intense and complex thing for her to have to carry this baby to term, thinking that she and the baby would die. But she was very brave and she did so. The baby came 3 months early and spent 3 months in the NICU. She almost bled out on the table, but they did save her life. And what we ended up doing is we told that story first, but people were really interested in like what was going to happen to the baby and how this family would fare. And so we decided to extend the project for a year. And I spent a year with Mayron and her family. And it ended up being a project not just about abortion. It ended up being about the social safety net and the failures of the social safety net. And because it's ProPublica, they do a lot of criticism of my state of Tennessee, which I really appreciated, because they are forcing these women to have these babies, but they are not offering any resources to them to help them be a strong mother to mostly children that are not well, that are very fragile in this world. So she had just had a baby. This is her baby, Zoe. And I encourage you to actually really spend time with this project online. It's available on ProPublica's website. We worked so hard on it, and I am really honored that Russet wanted me to share it with you. So through the year, Mayron and her husband fall apart because it all just becomes too much. They have no help. They can't get food stamps. They can't get the Social Security payments that are owed to them for their baby who has, a lot of disabilities. And this is the moment that she, her name is Elena, first opened her eyes. She weighed 1.5 pounds. Oh, 2 pounds, less than 2 pounds. But what happens is she was arrested right after for something kind of inane. And this story that we follow is just really about struggling on the poverty line. Mayron grew up very poor. She is desperately trying to find her way out. They have a business and they work very hard, but yet they still find themselves on the poverty line. She's constantly being arrested. She was just arrested 2 days ago for physically beating up her husband. It's true. I saw it once. But so the thing that I think was so beautiful about ProPublica's belief in the story is that Mayron is not a perfect person. She has had several children taken away from her. And she now has these 2 babies, and she's fighting really hard to keep them. But again, everything is stacked against her. And so that's really what we talk about in this story. We talk about the fact that she has no parental leave. These are our accountability points that were very important to ProPublica. And I'm just going to quickly kind of move through it. It was a really, really incredible experience to have a front row seat to Mayron's or Elena's first year. But inevitably, her and her husband, they're former substance users, and they relapsed during that time. And they went through a pretty difficult experience, and it was very challenging to watch them go through that and not really be able to do anything for them because that was not my job. That's Chris at his job. They all, you know, like so many poor people, so many of the things that were happening to them are things that I see happening to so many people living on the poverty line. And it just shows how hard it is to rise into the middle class from living below the poverty line, and how the resources are so complicated and so difficult to get. There are resources available in the state, but they couldn't access them. They were so complicated to access. And in some cases, they were just ignored when they attempted to access them. So it's, Maynard was working as an insulation specialist. She was leaving in the middle of the night to go to work and not coming home for 13 to 14 hours because she had to drive an hour and a half each way. And then the shifts were 12 hours. And then when she got home, she was taking care of her children. Is that it? I'll finish my thought. And so this is one of my favorite images. She's having dinner, she's cleaning the bathroom, and she's bathing her child. And this was very much what it was like with Mayron. So I will let you guys go and explore the story if it's interesting to you. It was probably one of the most moving experiences of my life. I've never had a story take me down, put me in so much pain, and which is funny to say because obviously Mayron went through so much more pain, but it was, it impacted the way that I thought about everything. And I'm really grateful to ProPublica for funding it. This is where things get really dark. They keep arresting her, and then because she's on probation, she has to be arrested twice. Has anyone experienced that? It's insane. And these are misdemeanors, but they make her go to jail twice every time she's arrested for something, which means more court fees and another lawyer and another lawyer. She also is, she's not just taking care of her babies, but she's caring for her mother who has some mental health issues and is unable to care for herself, and her father who's a pretty severe alcoholic. That's him. And so she has these additional dependents, and they don't work, they don't have money. So she is working to also pay for their living expenses. Oh, also really quickly, and then I promise to be done. The as it was given to me is on view at a gallery called CC Projects on the lower Chinatown, 17 Allen Street. And we have 3 posters in the back, you can take them. And so if you're interested in the themes that I discussed in that work, I encourage you to go spend some time with the exhibition. And this work is going to be on display June 1st at Photoville. So I also hope that you will come down and learn a little bit more about Mayron's story, because I didn't do a good job of explaining it. But also there's this really wonderful text that ProPublica wrote that will really do a much better. So thank you.
Can you guys hear? It's working. I'm being heard. Okay, I think. You hear me? Yes. Okay. So Carly Ries is our next. Should I stand over here and then maybe, yeah, okay. Okay, now I can speak and you can hear me. Thank you so much, Stacy. That was really terrific. And I highly encourage everyone when we're done after the Q&A to take a look at Stacy's book. And there are other projects as well as maquettes for future books, as I understand. Past books, future books that are also on the table. And in salons, we encourage you to browse. So we allow time before and after so people can actually look at the books and aren't rushed in and out just to hear the presentation, but also to see the results of it. So without any further ado, Carly Ries is a lens-based artist living in Brooklyn. Their photographs are in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the New York Public Library, among other institutions. They received an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Ries oversees the Peter J. Cohn Collection, a vast archive of vernacular photographs from the 20th century, and teaches photography at the New School. Carly will present their recent book, Centerfold, a sequence of collaborative portraits and fragmented scenes from the pages of vintage XXX magazine pages that are detached from their original purpose and queered by the artist's hands. Throughout their photographs and photo books, Ries explores recurring symbols of nude iconography in art history and visual culture, appropriating archival imagery from pornography and anonymous sources to destabilize authorship. So please welcome Carly.
Thank you. And thank you, Stacy. I am really excited to be here. Thank you, 10 by 10. Thank you, Magnum. I have a presentation of my Centerfold project. I'm going to share. So this is a project that I started a few years ago. It's a project that began actually with portraits I made of a collaborator, a friend of mine named Ruby, who was an artist, a graduate student at the Art Institute of Chicago along with me. And we set out to make a series of portraits after walking through the halls of the museum, the Art Institute, looking at figures throughout the centuries of art history and having conversations about our own internal feeling of androgyny when looking at images of female nudes. So I wanted to start with Ruby. The pictures that I made of her were one of exploring posture. And when I received the files back, the negatives back, I was really excited to see the elements of kinship that were able to be on display between myself and this other person gazing directly at me. So at the same time, I didn't know what to do with them. So I put them away for several years. When I moved to New York, I came upon a stack of lesbian porn from the 70s and 80s that was made by men and for men, but the scenes had everything in them that interested me from the perspective of the male gaze. So here is the only picture I was able to find in all of the magazines that were in this large stack of an actual photographer. You can see just the hint of someone's leg. And I very intentionally, as I've been working, and you'll see, try to obscure what the intended purpose was for the photographs, to play with what your imagination might fill in, but also to really highlight the direction of the gaze. A lot of the scenes had floral sheets, silky sheets, everything was pink. And I truly was like transfixed by how cliche all of the tropes were. So on the surface of the image, there was the symbolism. Every prop had really great weight behind it. Every piece of jewelry had flowers on it. If there was a tattoo, it happened to be floral or it was a butterfly. And there were houseplants sprinkled throughout. So on the surface, everything was feminine. Beneath the surface, I was attuning myself to an undercurrent of tension that was apparent in the deliberate posing. As again, this was the 1970s, 1980s. So setting up a photo shoot meant that you needed to have a lot of light. So there are multiple people behind the photographer setting up tripods, lights, reflectors, and setting up the scene. And if you're going to need that many people and spend that time getting everything right, you're going to take into consideration all of the details that are part of the scene. So the posing started to get very tired. They were obviously, the actors, the models were kind of doing the same thing over and over. In the magazines, I would come across this quite a bit, and I was interested in the repetition. In this image, someone is holding a Polaroid camera and taking a picture of her companion. I've gone in and overlaid my own images. So this is actually a still life that I made. It's a floral still life, a peony, against a wall. And so there's an echoing of the shadow of the flower and the flower itself, obscuring most of this figure, the central figure's body. But I'm not trying to censor the nudity. I'm mostly just trying to call your attention away from it. A lot of times I like to incorporate my own hand, partially because it's really how I make things, and I have decided to not keep out the process. And I get to also complete the image and make a new image. So this is a spread of a magazine page, and I have covered up some of what is happening, but in the way that I've done so with my hands, I've almost created legs to complete a figure. At least that's the way I have seen it. There's a flattening of the central hand from the page, and I'm really interested in the surfaces of pictures as well as their dimensionality, and playing with how a flat image can actually be multidimensional, and how something that was really, again, meant to be kind of flipped through, mostly for male hetero pleasure, could actually be made queer, or if that's possible. And if so, what does that look like? What does that mean? So I come back to Ruby because over time, like, I've always been interested in photography as a collaborative process. So the model is also an author of their own image. I might be the one recording it and setting the scene a bit, but without Ruby, I could not have made this picture. It's actually her body and her conversation with me that allowed us to come to this pose. And I similarly think that these models sometimes probably gave ideas to their photographers. And at the very least, they were colleagues with each other. So throughout the book, I have this doubling between the photographer and the models, and then myself and my own collaborator model. So you'll see in this image, in the center, there's a house plant and a lake and a stack of magazines. There was a lot of other things going on at the time in this picture, but I was looking through these magazines over and over and over again, looking for details that I had overlooked. And I started to think about, like, could the houseplants have some sort of, could they be objects with a bit of a story to tell? At the same time, could the models have been gazing and looking around the room? What did they see when they were there? I put them in conversation again with my own images. I began to take still lifes, sometimes just to look at the way that we objectify something, something that's alive, and to play again with doubling and our sense of time. And I love to play with the mirroring between my own images and images that I source from other places, like these magazines, and later on, images that I source from the Cohen collection where I work. And I put all these together without identifying where they came from. I am taking fragments, which means that I'm co-authoring the images. I'm also taking away any authorship. And by mixing everything together, I really don't want there to be one person that's the source of the image, because again, I view the models it posed as potential authors of their own images, and we have anonymous photographers. And really the most interesting thing is the pictures themselves. So there are not so many instances when the models look out at the camera. Sometimes it's hard to actually see their eyes. They're often just like averted, or they're out of frame, because that really wasn't the point for the magazine. So there were times when I would just look for what the inner experience might have been for the subject. So I was looking for eye contact where I could find it. In this piece, which is echoed in the book, which I'll show you, we get progressively closer into the image. So as we get closer, the image kind of starts to fall apart into like the dots of the ink on the page. And where her eyes of the original model might be like maybe going into a state of dissociation, or she's thinking about her grocery list, or just really, who knows what she's thinking, could be a range of things. I've also pulled an eye that was staring straight ahead from another image, from another woman, to stare right out, to maybe double, triple enhance the feeling of eye contact and the awareness of the person being photographed. This is another example of me pulling images from different places within the magazine to create many eye contacts, and to kind of play with where your eyes as a viewer might move. And this is a spread from the book. On the one hand, you have the floral tights, which became like a recurring theme for this particular subject, and the shoes. And then I paired it with a botanical that I found in a botanical garden where I've done a residency. I've been interested in botanical works because through the act of labeling a plant, you also specify its gender, and then you also like imbue all these meanings onto it. And so I've been playing with those. The images in the book will overlay. So this is just an example of that. Here's a house plant, a tattoo on the model. the camera comes into play again and the floral sheets. So the spread, the image on the left is from the Cohen collection, and the material of the print is actually falling apart and melted off. And there are feathers on the sheet. And on the right, there's my hand pulling flowers down. And I combined these two just to see what would happen and see what the potential the meanings could be. Now might be a good time for me to show the physical book. So while we get that going, the book is like a magazine. That was really intentional for me. Thank you so much. Okay, yes. Yes, tell me. Thank you. So that was a really important physical structure for me that I developed. I wanted the book to be malleable. I wanted it to be soft. I wanted you to touch it and be aware of your fingers touching the page while you touched it, so that you also were more in tune with your own physical sensations. So much of nude imagery seems so devoid of the sensuality of the subject, and so much for the desire of the person looking at the picture. And I wanted to bring that in through the physicality of the book. So this is an example of transparent pages that are woven throughout. So the images can be seen multiple times and through each other, so that when you're looking, you realize that you're remembering an image that you saw before, which is how I think we all see pictures. It's certainly how I see them, that we are weaving associations as we look through the world. And then as you're holding the book, you would notice your hand mirroring my hand. In this case, they're both my hands. This is that sequence that I showed before. So this was almost more like a film. If a book could be like a film, it would move closer and closer. I actually think a lot in film language. I often say that I am splicing something together. And so many of these scenes evoke short films to me. This is an example of eye contact, which I find to be like a guiding point throughout the book. Throughout the book, you'll return to the gaze, playing with mirroring, playing with layering, and trying to create waves in the layering of this water image. I'm curious, how do I make an image move, bring something into it? So this is that scene. So the book is really an invitation for you to think through the same sorts of sets of issues that I think about, which is like, what is going on here? I ask more questions than are answered in the book, because I don't think that there's one narrative happening. I'm more interested in the echoes between whatever plant design is on here, and the blinds on the window behind, with the ceiling in that garden, and the sensuality of the flowers. So these are rose rings. I am also looking at the way flowers could mimic people and faces. So I'm very intentionally with the sequencing, moving from one to the next, so that you then get brought to the centerfold, and the red thread is going beneath her, splitting her in two. And she is the center. So the book starts to get into mirroring, which is, again, and this is one where I've split this scene to kind of create open space. So you have to fill in what's happening, and more of the emphasis is on her downward gaze, the flowers in her eye, the flowers in her hair, and then her hands and the movement. That's like a very stunted, like no, it's very unnatural what she's doing, and very like overly posed. The action is kind of behind her, and the glasses became like these beautiful shimmering vessels. And these are the details that I don't think the original people who bought the magazine really would have cared very much about, the glasses, but someone cared about them, and I care about them now, because they tell a story and they give me the ability to pull these details for my own reasons. This spread is also partially the cover. In the very beginning and the very end of the book, there are also these other eyes. So this is from a cover of Playboy magazine, where the cover had this person, but instead of irises, she had the Playboy bunny in her eyes. So this is a scan of the actual cover, and there's lots of creases, and it's been worn, and there's fingerprints on the actual one. And but I've returned the irises to her eyes so that she can potentially see. And you actually make eye contact with her instead of just seeing the bunnies in her eyes. So yeah, I'm selling this book in the back. I look through this and see different things every time. And hopefully that's an experience that you could have if you spend time with it. One of the other things about authorship is that, like, some of these images are mine, but I don't own any of them. If you have the book, when you look through it, you then incorporate the images into yourself. And so you then have some sort of experience with them. And images kind of disperse around the world, and they all belong to us. We don't own any of them. So I also love books for that reason, because books can really move beyond just a photo on the wall or in your home or on your phone. They really have the ability to connect us. And I view this project as being also a way of connecting us to people in these magazines that we might not have given a second thought to their experience. And certainly the people originally making the magazines, the idea was to create desire. And I'm interested in how these relate to contemporary, feminist performance art. Like, what are the associations with Edward Weston and all of these potential abstractions. So I really quickly just want to say thank you. I didn't get a chance to, show this other project because I don't want to overwhelm. But can I give one sneak? Okay. A sneak. Okay. So I am starting a new book. So let's see. That's connected to all of this because of all these mirrors and the work I do at the collection, where I'm using images that I find from Peter Cohen's collection and I'm placing them on surfaces and using mirrors to obscure and show, use my body as also an instrument. And maybe that's the last one, so that'll work. So I have a whole new project that's spinning off from this, and it'll be out next summer. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I wanted to open it up to questions from our audience. But Stacy, you want to come in and join us at the table? Does anyone have any question in particular they'd like to ask of Stacy and Carly about their work, their books, their the ProPublica project? No one. Okay.
First of all, I wanted to say that I thought you did a fabulous job, so don't apologize. You did a great job. But I was wondering how you found the people, how you were introduced to the people that you met down there, and also if you were in the room and you were seeing things that you like with the baby or the other children or things like that, how do you not help? I always wonder about that with people doing any kind of, don't intervene. How do you not get involved? It's hard.
It was a huge issue throughout the entire year. I had many arguments with my photo editor. And again, I make my artwork as a critique of photojournalism. So I have a lot of opinions about that very thing. And ProPublica has some very hard rules. They are very, very interested in maintaining the fantasy of objectivity. And I worked for them. They were our client. And so I wanted to take their rules seriously. But there were times, one of the last times I saw them, ProPublica has this really beautiful process called No Surprise, where they tell the person, the subject of the story, everything that's in the story. They don't let them read it. They're very particular about that, but they share all the different parts of the things that they're going to talk about. And we had to do that with Mayron. And it's, it's such a heavy story. It was really difficult. But when I went to go do the No Surprises part with her, she was in a really bad place. And I had never seen her like that. And there were diapers. She's very clean. She's constantly cleaning, but there were diapers, dirty diapers strewn about the house. The kids were in dirty diapers. There were no diapers. And so I did go and get diapers. And as I was driving to do that, I was telling my editor what was going on. And she's yelling at me for buying diapers. And I was just like, not now. That's just not where I'm at. And so in the end, I bought the diapers, and I, went against my editor's wishes. I think the other thing that was really challenging in that story, under the same guise, is that they were constantly asking me if the children's welfare was okay. And I didn't feel like I could make that decision. That wasn't my role. That wasn't my job. But they have liability issues, and also they're concerned. And so we had constant conversations about that. Really tough. Yeah. But they were incredibly supportive. Let's say they were incredibly supportive. They were concerned about my mental health. They were very, very cautious in ways that I'm not always cautious. For example, they made me stop driving in the car with her when she was drunk. I was upset about too. We have each bit off, so we show you both the artists, and the mic up here will pick up the audio.
So just speak up. That's the feedback.
I have a question for Carly.
One of the things that I admired about your book is the layout and the different forms and the different cuts that you made with the photographs from small to different sizes, the transparency. Can you talk a little bit about how you did your layout and to get to thread that visual element throughout?
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely felt like I didn't want to make a photo book that was very tight and had a set structure. I wanted to have it be as free flowing as possible, but with a tightness within the association that would be built between the images. So I truly just went through and took each page on its own terms visually with what I had in front of me. But I also would just build a set of sequence of pages. And if I couldn't find a link, I would then go and make one. And through the editing process, I actually generated so much of this work. So while some photo books that I've made in the past have been a container for a project, this project actually, that's most fundamental container is the book. It could live in many ways. And I felt like being less specific about what the book could be and being more free was a process of not limiting myself. And that's also where working with other material that's not my own came in. It freed me to cut into images because I didn't have any connection to them. And then through that connection, I could create new ones. But I definitely wanted it to be as dynamic as possible to weave through so that you might never find out what is the structure of the book. You had to keep on turning the pages, take everything on its own.
I have a question. Does the work exist in any form of the book?
It has existed on the walls of the gallery. It exists as layered prints. So that's where some of the layering comes in terms of the book, where the prints exist. I print on different materials, silk and transparency, negatives, and different kinds of paper. And so it exists in physical form like that.
Sure. I have a question to Stacy. With regards to that project, Marin, is that what her name was? Marin. I'm wondering, like, since you grapple with so much kind of like internal dialogue and your work sort of confronts like the history of like extractive journalism, I'm wondering, like, for you, a story like that, you spent a good period of your life with a year. I'm wondering, like, what feels like success at the end of that type of project? Like, how do you sort of define success for yourself at the end of the project?
I think the as it was given to me work is a lot more difficult. As an artwork, it's more open-ended. It's not trying to force you into like a very specific agenda. It's just trying to open up questions. So the ProPublica piece, there was some relief in that. And I think that's why I'm constantly switching back and forth. Because just when I get fatigued or frustrated with one, I just move to the other. But you know, ProPublica was very, you know, this was a reported story. So even though I had this collection of images and this really intense experience, inevitably they went in and organized it around a set of issues, which they call accountability points. And that was incredibly beautiful. It's very tangible when you read it. You're getting concrete information about, so like, you know, obviously the images are very intense and they're very immersive and very intimate. But the text really kind of brings you out of that in this really beautiful way and sort of helps you understand who is at fault for the circumstances that Maren is going through, and how we might be able to solve those problems.
There's a question over there.
It's sort of sticky too, like going back to the idea of like, right, well, you guys like finite objects. Obviously the work you've been accomplished on for years and years. Was it tricky for you to be like, okay, it's done?
Yeah, it's really hard. The exhibition is really easier because it's ongoing. So every time I show the exhibition, I sort of critique it and then I sort of shift things around. So it's constantly like it's kind of living and breathing. But well, it doesn't work like that. I think the best advice I got was to just lean into the book itself and not worry about trying to show the best pictures, show the work in the best light. And so I really, it was such a huge relief when someone explained that to me. So I sort of let go of needing to authoritatively show you what this project was, and I just tried to make a good book. I imagine when I'm 80 that I'm going to have another version that's going to be this thick, and that keeps me sane.
I think that, yeah, there's also kind of Stacy, I'm everything. It's kind of like leading on to my question. When you're working within communities and you present books to the world, you're kind of, you know, encapsulating everything that we should see about that community, and they kind of get stuck in a space and time. It's very specific. And I wonder about, do you have any kind of internal struggle when you're making work with that kind of community about the impact of making a physical, finite object and how that affects their way of kind of seeing themselves, whether they feel kind of, you know, stuck in that narrative of that point in time because there's this object?
I mean, I think that's interesting. It actually brings up another issue that I think was even more at the forefront for me, which was that I was making a $85 book about poverty. And I found that really problematic. And to offset that, I did this strange pamphlet project, which is actually in the back there, where I sort of tried to create something that was useful to the community itself. And I ended up doing these healthcare pamphlets, which kind of sort of provide and circulate resources. But that was just for me to offset my personal guilt. My publisher was kind enough to donate 50 books to public libraries. And so I was able to give them, again, I don't think that's solving any of those problems, but I think at least in the trying, I was able to sort of make peace with it. And I know I did not answer your question. I answered my own question, and I apologize.
I think we have a question right here. Yeah. Yes, I have a question for Stacy. Stacy, one of the things that I looked at your book before I listened to you talk. One of the things that I really admired about you, and I mean, I know you take on tough topics, but I also saw when I was looking through your book that you were engaging in the history of Appalachia. And also, I did not realize that you had done the drawings in the front of the book. So but once you talked, I realized that you were working photojournalistically. You were working in a documentary style, and then also you had artistry and talent and other ways. So my question to you is, how did you bring all that together into the book?
Great question. And the answer is very slowly. I was living on the road for 3.5 years, which was a terrible idea, but it wasn't an idea, it just happened. And then I had a nervous breakdown, as one would, because this was not van life. This was just miserable car life car sleeping. And so I was able to go to a residency. And that was the first time. I mean, I had been dumping images onto a hard drive without even looking at them for a number of years. I had no idea what I was doing anymore. And so I had this wonderful residency where I laid out a physical version of the book, and then I inserted that into InDesign. And then it took 5 years from that moment to slowly process and sequence and work through all the components. I argued a lot with my publisher about some of those elements being whether they should be in the book or not. And inevitably, 5 years later, we ended up with this thing. Thank you.
I guess I'm kind of following up on that. Did you start with the idea that you were going to be making a book when you first approached Carly this body of work? I mean, was that in your mind as well? It sounds like Stacy didn't have any idea that this was going to end up as a book. Did you kind of see that I'm approaching this body of work and it is going to be a book?
You know, I've always made mock photo books of my work. I've always made mock books they were just what I would do with my prints in my studio, and they were a way of bringing things together. So I did know when I first got the pictures of Ruby, I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but I put them away for something special and knew that I would build a body of work to meet them. When I came across the magazines, there was just so much material. A book was the most inevitable thing to make. And because all of it was printed material and it was about printed imagery, a book just made the most, it just felt like a poetic reason to make a book. So, but it also took me several years. And I would say that one of the beauties of working on a long-term project is that to really spend time thinking about why something is there and why you're including it, because it's not just something that you're putting together. And so it gives you a working process to also think about your own reasons for why you do something. And so I think I can see that in your work and your process. Like, why is this picture of this person, this particular picture that's going to depict this person in here? Why is it important? And what does it do when I put it next to this other image? And the thinking process, and the book is my thought process. And I think it's a way of sharing a larger, one image almost can do so much, but it also is so limited. So when you have more images, you can just bring in more perspective and more possibilities and more potential. And when we're dealing with people and human experiences, the more images you have, the broader perspectives are, and you can just break free of the confines of gendered lens or class lens, and other narratives that are imposed on.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a perfect time to end our Q&A. So both have books at the back table that we have some time here. You can grab a glass of wine, talk to your other attendees, find out. A lot of us here are bookmakers or photographers or involved in the process, and salons are very much about bringing the community together. I just want to give one kind of heads up. I believe it is the 21st of May, in about 3 weeks. We are going to have another salon at the New York Public Library, the picture collection. We will have presentations by 3 of the current this year's fellows. If you don't know what the picture collection is, it's one of those great collections of analog images that is cut out and a little bit like Peter Cohn's collection, sorted by themes. And each year they invite artists in to work with it. So we will have Noah Doley and Michelle McGuire, who is here, yes, as well as, and I'm just going to pronounce the name, Audra Wolowitz. And the three of them will be presenting the projects that they have been working on as fellows at the picture collection. This will happen at the New York Public Library. So stay tuned by either going to our website or signing up for our email list at 10x10 photobooks.org. And thank you to our presenters for sharing their work, for sharing their time. And please feel free to ask them further questions.